This Orange County neighborhood was the scene of a brutal murder more than 3 decades ago. Investigators say it was here in 1992 that Karen Spencer was attacked and killed by her husband, Dusty Spencer. Retired detective Thomas McCann was one of the investigators on this case.
It was a particularly violent scene. Dusty was gone from the scene. He had fled the area. It was just a sad situation for the family.
In January of 1992, only about a month after he was arrested and released for choking and threatening his wife, Karen Spencer, detectives said he stabbed Karen and beat her with a brick at their Orange County home. Karen's son, Tim, tried to intervene. Karen didn't survive. West 2 spoke with her son after Spencer was sentenced back in the 90s.
Do you feel sorry for him or pity for him at all?
No, not at all. He gets what he deserves.
West 2 reached out to Karen's family Thursday, but they didn't want to speak. In the statement read by his spiritual advisor, Spencer addressed Tim directly.
Timothy, I made you carry what no child should. I'm ashamed of what I did to you. I'm sorry.
A detective on Karen's case told West 2 back in the 90s he thought Spencer should get the death penalty. When we spoke with that same detective earlier this month, his stance hadn't changed.
I mean, he brutalized that lady.
It was December 1991. He had just been arrested for choking her, covering her nose and mouth with one hand and strangling her with the other, while threatening to kill her. He was sitting in a cell in Orange County, Florida, and he picked up the phone and called her. When she answered, he told her exactly what was going to happen. When I get out, I'm going to finish what I started. A judge set his bail at $5,000. And he was released within days. 5 weeks later, on the morning of January 18, 1992, Dusty Ray Spencer kept his promise. On June 25, 2026, 34 years later, the state of Florida executed Dusty Ray Spencer by lethal injection for the 1992 murder of his wife, Karen Spencer, in Orange County, Florida. He was 74 years old. He became the oldest person ever executed in Florida's history. And the case that began in her backyard in 1992 changed the way the entire state of Florida handles domestic violence forever. If you are new to this channel, support is like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. New videos drop every week. But to understand how it came to this, you need to go back to Florida in the late 1980s. Because the real story starts long before Gurney and Stark, in a marriage that began with success and love, and ended in a backyard while a teenager watched his mother bleed out and screamed for it to stop. But before we get to that needle, you need to know who Karen Spencer actually was. And you need to understand every warning sign, every arrest, every missed opportunity, and every decision that put her in that backyard on the morning of January 18th. 1992. Because this case is not just about what one man did to one woman. It is about what a system failed to stop, and the reforms that came too late to save her life. Karen Spencer was 40 years old when she was murdered in her own backyard on January 18, 1992. She was a businesswoman, a mother, a woman who had built something real alongside the man who would eventually destroy her. Together with Dusty Spencer, she had built a painting company called A+ Painting from the ground up. By 1990, that company was earning more than $200,000 a year. She had helped build that. With her hands, her time, and her trust. She had a teenage son from a previous relationship, a boy named Timothy Johnson who was 17 years old at the time of her murder. She and Timothy lived together in their home in Orange County. And when Dusty Spencer came into their lives, Timothy gained a stepfather. What no one in that house could fully see, not until the cracks became fractures, was the kind of man Dusty Spencer was when things stopped going his way. Dusty Ray Spencer, who was just 39 years old when he murdered his wife Karen Spencer, by stabbing, beating, and blunt force trauma, in the backyard of their Orange County, Florida home on January 18, 1992. Dusty Ray Spencer was born on February 13, 1952, in Pennsylvania. He graduated from Hopewell Area High School in 1972. After graduation, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. He served for 3 years and was discharged in 1973. After leaving the military, Spencer moved to Florida and married his first wife. But within 4 years of leaving the Corps, by around 1977, he was already in trouble with the law. He was arrested for delivering $1,600 worth of marijuana to an undercover drug agent. It was not the crime of a violent man. Not yet. But it was the beginning of a pattern that would define the next 5 decades of his life, a pattern of making choices that placed his own desires above every other consideration, and of believing that consequences were something that happened to other people. By the late 1980s, Spencer had met Karen. And for a time, while the business was growing and the money was coming in, things were working so well between them. The problem is that for men like Dusty Spencer, everything works until it doesn't. And when it stops working, they find someone to blame. Dusty and Karen Spencer later got married on February 11, 1989. They were both partners in every sense, in life and in business. He saw his partner business booming, and was earning more than $200,000 a year in 1990. On the surface, their life looked like a success story. But the early 1990s brought an economic recession that hit small businesses hard. Revenue that had seemed reliable began to dry up. Money that had once been plentiful was suddenly a source of tension. And as the financial pressure increased, so did the arguments. So did the controlling behavior. So did the anger. By late 1990, the disputes were frequent. By early December 1991, Karen had made a decision. She asked Dusty to move out of their home. She told him she wanted a divorce. That request, the most basic assertion of a woman's right to leave a marriage that was no longer safe, is what set everything else in motion. On December 10, 1991, Dusty Spencer confronted Karen about money she had withdrawn from the company's bank account. The argument escalated. And then Spencer did what he had apparently decided he was going to do regardless of how the argument ended. He covered Karen's nose and mouth with one hand. He wrapped his other hand around her throat. He choked her, suffocated her, hit her, and told her directly, in words out loud, so there would be no confusion, that he was going to kill her. Karen called the police. Spencer was arrested. Now here is where this case begins to reveal the systemic failure that Karen Spencer's murder later exposed. From his jail cell the following day, Spencer called Karen. And what he said to her on that call was not remorse. It was not an apology. It was a declaration. When I get out, I'm going to finish what I started. He said this from jail, while he was being held on charges of domestic violence. After choking and threatening to kill his wife, he called her and told her he would kill her. This was reported to the police. It went into the court record. And when a judge reviewed Spencer's bail application, a man who had choked his wife, threatened to kill her, and then called her from jail to repeat the threat, was set at $5,000 bail. $5,000. For a man who had told his wife he would finish killing her. Dusty Spencer was released. Karen made a decision that would haunt the rest of this story. She asked Spencer to come back to the house for the Christmas holidays, for 4 or 5 days. She wanted to give him that time. When Christmas was over, she asked him to leave again. He did. On New Year's Day, 1992, Spencer was out drinking with friends. At some point during that night, he told one of them what he was thinking about. He said he should take Karen out on their boat and throw her overboard. The friend remembered that statement. 2 days later, Spencer told the same friend that Karen had refused to go out on the boat with him. He had already tried one method. She had said no to another. And now he was running out of options. In the early morning of January 4, 1992, Spencer returned to Karen's home. He went to the bedroom and began beating her. Timothy Johnson, Karen's 17-year-old son, Spencer's stepson, was awakened by the sound of his mother's screams. He ran to the bedroom. What he saw when he opened that door would stay with him for the rest of his life. Spencer was on top of Karen on the bed, holding her down and punching her repeatedly in the face with his fist. Timothy tried to intervene, to pull this man off his mother, to stop what was happening. Spencer reached for the clothes iron on the dresser. He grabbed Timothy by the head and struck him with it. Then he struck him again. And again. Despite the boy's screams and pleas, Spencer kept hitting him with the iron. And then he looked at the 17-year-old boy he had just beaten with a household appliance and said, "You're next. I don't want any witnesses." He then told Timothy he was going to ruin his mother's life the way she had ruined his. Timothy fled to his room and grabbed the phone to call police. Spencer followed him into the room, yanked the cord from the wall, and kept hitting Timothy with the iron. Somehow, Karen managed to escape during that moment. She ran to a neighbor's home. Timothy was eventually able to get out too. Both of them were taken to the hospital and treated for their injuries. At the hospital, Karen told her treating physician that Spencer had beaten her with a clothes iron. The physician documented the injuries. They were consistent with exactly what Karen had described. Deputies went looking for Spencer after the January 4th attack. They wanted to arrest him. They could not find him, even though Karen gave them specific information about where he would likely be. But they eventually stopped looking for him. Spencer was not arrested for the January 4th attack. Not that day. Not in the days that followed. He remained free. Somewhere out there, in the homes of friends, moving around while Karen and Timothy recovered from their injuries. A man who had beaten a woman and her teenage son with a clothes iron told the boy he didn't want any witnesses, and torn the phone out of the wall to prevent them from calling for help, walking free because deputies could not locate him. 16 days passed. On the morning of January 18, 1992, Karen Spencer's son Timothy was asleep in their home. He was awakened by his mother's screams again. He grabbed a rifle from his mother's bedroom and ran toward the sound of her voice. He found them in the backyard. Dusty Spencer had Karen on the ground. He was hitting her in the head with a brick. There was blood on her face and blood everywhere. Timothy raised the rifle. He tried to shoot his stepfather to save his mother's life. The rifle misfired. It did not discharge. Spencer, seeing the boy with the weapon, wrenched it from him. He turned back to Karen on the ground. He grabbed the hem of her nightgown and pulled it up, exposing her body to her son, and told her to show Timothy what she had. An act of pure, deliberate humiliation. Something designed not just to hurt Karen, but to degrade and traumatize both of them simultaneously. Then he took her head and slammed it against the concrete wall of the house. Karen begged him. With whatever was left of her voice, strength, and of her breath after the brick and the concrete and the blood, she said one word. "Stop." Spencer pulled out a knife. He told Timothy that if the boy tried to carry his mother away, he would use it on him too. Then he stabbed Karen. 5 times. In the chest. The medical examiner would later testify that 2 of those stab wounds, one to the heart, one to the lung, caused the blood loss that killed her. When police arrived, Karen Spencer was on the ground. She was dead. She had cuts on her face, cuts on her hands and arms from trying to defend herself, blunt force trauma to the back of her head, and stab wounds to her chest. She had been alive and conscious through all of it. Karen Spencer died on the concrete of her own backyard, with her son standing over her, begging Dusty to stop. She did not die quickly. She did not die peacefully. She died slowly, in terror, while her son watched and could do nothing to save her. On January 20th, 1992, 2 days after the murder, Polk County deputies tracked Spencer to the home of one of his friends, where he had gone after leaving the scene. He was arrested there. The investigation was not complicated. Timothy Johnson had witnessed virtually the entire attack. Additionally, there were Karen's prior police reports, the December 10th choking incident, the January 4th iron attack, which documented a pattern of escalating violence. On February 6, 1992, an Orange County grand jury formally indicted Spencer for the murder of Karen Spencer, the attempted murder of Timothy Johnson, aggravated battery, and aggravated assault. The trial of Dusty Ray Spencer began on November 2, 1992, in Orange County, Florida. Spencer was convicted on all charges: first-degree premeditated murder for the killing of Karen Spencer, aggravated assault for the attack on her during the final incident, the lesser-included offense of attempted second-degree murder for the January 4th attack on Timothy, and aggravated battery for that same attack on the teenager. The jury recommended the death penalty by a vote of 7-5. On December 21, 1992, the trial judge sentenced Dusty Ray Spencer to death, along with consecutive sentences of 5 years for aggravated assault, 15 years for attempted second-degree murder, and 15 years for aggravated battery. In 1995, the Florida Supreme Court vacated the death sentence and ordered resentencing, because the trial court had improperly found an aggravating factor and improperly rejected a statutory mitigating circumstance. Circuit Judge Belvin Perry conducted the resentencing without a new jury. He found 3 aggravating circumstances. The murder was committed in an especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel manner. It was cold, calculated, and premeditated, and Spencer had a prior violent felony conviction based on the contemporaneous charges from the same incident. He found no statutory mitigating factors. On January 18, 1995, exactly 3 years to the day after Karen Spencer was murdered in her backyard, Dusty Ray Spencer was resentenced to death. It is worth noting that under Florida's current sentencing law, a death penalty recommendation must be unanimous. A 7-5 jury vote would not be sufficient today. Anti-death penalty advocates raised this point in the weeks before Spencer's 2026 execution, arguing that he could not have received the death penalty under current standards. Dusty Ray Spencer arrived at Florida's death row following his 1992 conviction. He would spend the next 34 years there, through his 40s, his 50s, his 60s, and into his 70s, as his body aged and his health deteriorated inside the Florida prison system. During those 34 years, Spencer filed multiple appeals at every level of the state and federal court systems. The arguments ranged across many legal issues: prosecutorial misconduct during trial, improper sentencing procedures, constitutional challenges to his execution. Every single one was rejected. By 2026, Spencer was 74 years old. He was in poor health, suffering from cognitive decline, heart problems, cirrhosis of the liver, and other serious medical conditions. His attorneys and advocates argued in the weeks before his execution that a man in his condition, at his age, could no longer pose any threat to anyone. They argued it was inappropriate to execute someone so old and so ill. They noted that since 1976, only 12 of the 1,669 people executed across the United States had been 74 years old or older. On May 26, 2026, Governor Ron DeSantis signed Dusty Ray Spencer's death warrant despite the appeals. The execution was scheduled for June 25, 2026, at 6 p.m. at Florida State Prison near Stark. On June 10, Spencer filed a final appeal to the Florida Supreme Court. On June 18, that appeal was rejected. His attorneys then filed with the U.S. Supreme Court. That appeal was also denied. Every door was closed. For his last meal, Dusty Ray Spencer ordered a pizza, French fries, and a milkshake. On the evening of June 25, 2026, it was time. At 6 p.m. on June 25, 2026, the curtain of the death chamber at Florida State Prison near Stark went up on schedule. Dusty Ray Spencer was already strapped to the gurney. The 4-line was already in his arm. He was 74 years old. His body had been failing him for years. When the warden asked Spencer if he had a final statement, he spoke. And in those final moments, the man who had beaten and choked and stabbed and humiliated his wife in front of her teenage son, the man who had called from jail to tell her he would finish what he started, and then come back and done exactly that, said this. Sorry. Sorry to the family. Into thy hands I commit my spirit and my soul. I'm on my way, Lord. I'm on my way. Amen. The 3-drug lethal injection was administered immediately after his final statement. Witnesses said Spencer appeared to breathe heavily for several minutes. Then all movement stopped. The warden stepped forward, shook him, and called out his name multiple times. Dusty Ray Spencer did not respond. He was pronounced dead at 6:10 p.m. on June 25, 2026. The drugs had taken effect within 10 minutes. He was 74 years old, the oldest person ever executed in the state of Florida's history, surpassing both Samuel Lee Smithers and R. Charlie Gifford, who were each 72 at the time of their executions in 2025 and 1951 respectively. Dusty Ray Spencer is now gone. Karen Spencer was 40 years old when he killed her. The system set her killer free for $5,000. Then failed to arrest him when he came back 2 weeks later. Then watched while he returned a final time and kept the promise he had made from his jail cell. Had Spencer been sentenced under current standards, he would have received life in prison. Instead, he spent 34 years on death row and was executed at age 74, as the oldest man ever executed in Florida history. Do you think justice was truly served for Karen Spencer? Or did the system fail Karen Spencer when a judge set $5,000 bail for a man who had just choked his wife and threatened to kill her? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if this story stayed with you, share it, like it, and subscribe. Because every story on this channel is about a real person. And every real person deserves to have their story told in full. If you're a lover of creepy true crime stories, true crime documentaries, horror crime, unsolved mysteries, and the rest, you can do well to check out our twin channel Mysterious Dark Files for more videos like that.